So Pastor asked me to talk a little bit, thank you. Pastor asked me to talk a little bit about aggression. And sometimes we can think of aggression as just, it's flat out a negative. It's a bad thing. It's always wrong. But there's very many examples where aggression is a good thing. Sports, for example. Like there's a whole, I'm not going to do it because it would be embarrassing, but there's a whole cheerleader song about, being aggressive that they'll speak to. But obviously there's other ones where it's very clearly not the route that you go. If you're talking to your boss about an issue that you have, you probably shouldn't be aggressive towards them because it probably won't go very well and you might not be employed any longer. Driving, you probably shouldn't be aggressive, but most people are. But then there's also double standards sometimes for when certain people are allowed to be aggressive and other people aren't on certain topics, or depending on where they're coming from or where their background is. So like as Christians, especially where I grew up, just for some reference to backtrack a bit, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area in California, which is a very interesting place to grow up. There's very few places that are like it in a lot of ways that are not particularly positive, and I'm very happy to be in North Carolina. Much prefer it over here. But one thing that I was told a lot growing up, and what teachers would tell me, what other people would tell me, is that faith is to be a private thing. It's like it's not something that is supposed to be spoken out. It's not something that you're supposed to talk to others about. It's not something that's to be shared. It's something that you keep privately because it can offend others. Other people believe things differently than you do. That it's something that you're supposed to just hold to yourself, never share, and don't speak to others about it. That's something that, again, teachers, authorities, different people said that this is how you are supposed to be. But there were other things that you were allowed to express in public that were kind of absurd, and I'm just bringing this up because of how wild it is. In San Francisco, it was a very common thing to see people, for example, publicly being nude. This is a normal occurrence that is there and was legal for quite some time. I think that they've made it illegal now, or like some kind of ordinance law, but generally, like this is a common sight if you've been to San Francisco, like just being in public nude. Normal thing, allowed. Sharing your faith, generally looked down upon. There's no law against it, but culturally, it's going to be frowned upon. And that's, by the way, not even the close to the worst thing that you'll see in public if you walk around the San Francisco Bay Area. Heroin addicts are just out in the streets. No laws are enforced on that. In fact, they're given free needles, other things like that. Like that is very common sight over there. There's so many things I could go into and just go for days and days about that. Another thing that has recently occurred, where interestingly enough that they decided that this is, it's allowed in the schools, and this is how they're going to treat children in that state. If a child decides in the state of the San Francisco Bay Area or in California as a whole, if they go to their teacher and say, I'm thinking that I'm more of a boy than I am a girl, even though they were born as a boy, or vice versa, that school can't tell the parents anything about it. In fact, they have to support that child to go through those things, to get medication, to do different things. And it is actually illegal if they were to tell the teacher about those things. So that's a very interesting area of just how they are and how things get to be. And the amount of things, like the things that they give them and do, it's just, it destroys these children's lives. Like they're being told that they go down these paths, that they change their way, they change the way that they are. It's going to bring them happiness, it's going to make them better, and it's something that you aren't allowed to speak against or speak out about, but it is something that you can publicly express and share and do. At the same time, faith is, again, not something that you were told to share or, have. And so there's this nature where things like that are very clearly in rebellion against God, and not just in that sense, but like I cannot tell you how many teachers I had that told me would mock Christianity, mock Christians, mock faith, just on a regular basis. Mock the concept of God, mock the idea of believing in God, just mock that as just pure idiocy. Literally, just like elementary school, middle school, high school, had teachers every year that would be like this. And this was just a very normal thing. You could do it one way, but you couldn't do it the other. If you bring up religion, you bring up things in school, that would lead to something poor. But if your teacher mocks it or looks down upon it or speaks about why this is ridiculous or these beliefs are ridiculous, perfectly acceptable. It was common in the culture. I bring all of this up because these people are in rebellion against God. They're against Him, and they don't understand the full concept of their actions, but they're incredibly aggressive about how these things spread and change. The amount of change that this society and this nation has gone through in the last decade is incredible. It is. I have a degree in history. I literally can't think of any other time period in history where this much change occurred over this short of a period of time. There's only a handful of times where this kind of thing has happened in the way that it has. And the way that it works is that there are people who very much want to spread their ideas, spread their beliefs, spread what they want the world to look like, how they want people to act, and they do it incredibly aggressively through every means that they have available to then shape society in the image that they would like it to be. And so we have this on one side, and on the other side, as Christians, it's not that we're, total, these people are obviously lost. They don't understand what they're doing, and we need to pray for them and help them, but at the same time, they are going against us. They see us as a problem, as a threat, as the thing that's keeping society back because we have these backwards beliefs and these things that shouldn't be around anymore. And so they do see that as a part of it, and we ultimately are left on this side where we're just not supposed to do much about it, according to them. So I also talk about this because I've had this issue where growing up like this, I grew up in some level of faith and I had some understanding that these things were wrong, but I didn't want to talk to people about my faith. I had no reason to share it. I didn't want to tell people about it because I was afraid of judgment, afraid of being condemned or seen as wrong or seen as ignorant or seen as the bad guy because I have different beliefs, or that I would want to bring people to church, being called a cultist, being called all of these different things because you have a faith that disagrees with theirs. Because you want to see them saved. You want to see the change. You know that the thing that I have has helped me, has bettered me, has made me a new person, and I want to share that with you because I can see the struggle, the pain, the things that you're going through. And I know that it can help you, but I'm afraid to actually talk to them because of that sense of stigma, that judgment that I'm afraid of. And so we can end up being very hesitant on this. We can think that things like this, when you talk about that if you share these things or if you talk about certain things, that maybe it's like, you're being political as a Christian and you're not supposed to be political. And absolutely, you shouldn't mix church and politics. And I can demonstrate to you what church and politics looks like as a mixture real quick. So if I got up here and I started to just tell you about how God wants you to vote for this candidate because he's going to have a 20% corporate tax rate, and that's much better than the current 25% corporate tax rate that we have, and then the other candidate is going to raise it up to 35%, and that's going to crash the economy. All of that's kind of important and would be something to be spoken about, but it definitely does not belong in church. But that's something that we can hesitate on, is where certain issues, certain sins, certain things that go on in the culture can be seen as a political topic. And so therefore we can't talk about that because we can't interject with politics. But it's not a matter of whether it has this label of being political. It's whether it's something that is the Bible speaks on, that God speaks on. It's whether it's good or evil. And that's why we have to confront certain things like this. I think Christ lays this out very well in Matthew 12:30. Where it is, he who is not with me is against me, and he who does not gather with me scatters abroad. That's a very fine line in the sand to draw. It is literally like if you're either on one side or the other. You're on God's team or you're against God. There's only two sides to this equation. There's no being in the middle. There's so common as well that you would see is people who would say I'm not religious but I'm spiritual, or I think that everybody's a little bit right, or everybody has this choice. Well, I think Jesus lays it out very clearly. You're either with Christ or you're against Christ. You can't play for both teams. And then another verse that just talks a lot about, again, just what happens. I bring up kids in school so much because it is such a particular thing that even Jesus himself points to this, where he's in Matthew 18:6. He says, "But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depth of the sea." Again, these are the words of Jesus Christ, but he's laying out that like when we have these things in place that lead children towards sin, it would be better for you if you had a millstone, which is a very large rock, put around your neck and you were just dropped into the ocean. That's the better outcome. And again, that's Jesus that's saying that. And so we need to recognize that there are certain evils that are going on and that they are very aggressive, that you have things in media and things that are exposed to children that are just not great, that they're going against God in every sense of the word. They exist like all throughout. I can't tell you, like I could sit here and give you nothing but examples of where like children's TV shows where they will directly put forward some pretty incredible, like insane things just constantly. Like it's bombarded. Like if you let a kid like go through just YouTube, okay, here's your iPad, here's YouTube, put it on shuffle. Eventually they're going to come across some pretty wild stuff, and that's by design. And so like, and it's not something that's just over there in, crazy California. It happens in North Carolina too. I've seen personally with my own eyes, at an event, there was a drag queen who was reading books to children that their parents were just sitting them down for to listen to. Again, just a man dressed as a woman in this very garish makeup outfit, and then just reading books, again, just about, it was basically just propaganda, just to indoctrinate them into this new thing in this very aggressive manner. And then there's another thing where we just see just blatant evil that goes on in this country in a way that we just kind of gloss over and we just don't even realize is that bad. Again, I wouldn't call this political. I think that this is a matter of what's right and what's wrong. But even though Roe v. Wade ended a few years ago, there's been over 1 million infants just, again, killed in America in the womb last year alone. It's just the death of children, and we just kind of like, at this point, we just kind of go through with it. It's something that, it just happens. You drive by a Planned Parenthood and you don't really think that much of it because it's just so normal to us. Because it's just been going on for years and years and years, and it's just been ingrained in us that this is just the thing that happens, and we don't really look at it for what it is. And this is something that, this one is not very new. This is something that has happened throughout history. It's something that happened throughout Israel's history. It's something that we see in the Bible come up, where a consistent issue that Israel falls into is idolatry, is this worship. And a lot of this worship that we see in it involves the sacrifice of children for your own gain, where you're taking your kid and you're throwing it onto these brazen altars, and then you're allowing the child to die, and you're supposed to get gain from this. This was a common practice that happened in the kingdom of Israel. At its worst, most of the priests of God were wiped out by Ahab and by Jezebel, where they just massacred them, replaced them with the priesthood of Baal, who again partook in these horrific sacrifices, who created this horrific culture for this nation. And so when they were placed in this measure, when these things happened, God appointed people to deal with this. Elijah was one of them, but another was Jehu. And Jehu is a very interesting figure in the Bible. He's the only king of Israel who really has anything positive spoken of him after you have the split between the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel after the death of Solomon. And at this, I'm going to summarize it because it's several chapters, and I'm not going to sit here and read several chapters for you, but you're just going to have to take my word for it. It is a great read, and so I would recommend that you go back to it. But at this time, so Israel was full-on Baal worship. They had basically replaced the God of the Bible. They had removed him from everything. Baal was the god that Ahab followed. Baal was the god that Jezebel followed. They were persecuting the priests and had done their best to try and replace God with this Baal. And again, one of the practices that they would do to worship Baal is to throw their children into fire in front of an altar as a sacrifice. That was just one example of the things that they would do. And so God anointed a man named Jehu and said that you are to be king over Israel, that you are to replace Ahab, that you are to overthrow him, that you are to kill him, that you are to wipe out his entire line. You're going to get rid of his wife, you're going to get rid of all of these people, you're going to get rid of all the Baal worshipers, and kill them all, remove them, and then replace it with my kingdom. And this is how, after Jehu does all of these things, this is how God responds to it. And the Lord said to Jehu, because you have done well in doing what is right in my sight, and have done in the house of Ahab all that was in my heart, your son shall sit on the throne of Israel to the 4th generation. And so, very clearly, all of this is in response to all the things that Jehu did, where he was removing the people, where he was getting rid of them from being able to have this position of power over Israel. And so that's what Jehu did. It's what God wanted of him. And just to be clear, before it sounds like I'm saying, like, let's go out and let's kill really bad people, just to be clear, that is not what I'm saying at all. Because at that time, that was the age of the law. Things were different at that point in terms of what God asked of people, of what he wanted from them. Right now, we are in the age of grace. And so, no, the solution right now is not to look at Jehu and say, okay, let's grab our pitchforks, let's grab our torches, let's go to town. Now, we have different tools. We have different things that God asks of us and commands of us. And so, the question is, what is our answer to the society that we face, the culture that we face, the enemies that exist that are against God that we have to deal with? So first I'm going to talk about what we don't do. So one of the first common issues that I've seen with different Christians, different places, I've interacted with a lot of people from different churches and different backgrounds. And one thing that I've seen that can happen is where you kind of recognize that society is going one way, it's corrupting, it has a bad influence on us, and so you isolate. You take yourself and you decide, okay, so I see all this as bad. I'm going to take myself, I'm going to take my family, I'm going to take my church, I'm going to put myself over here, I'm just going to ignore the entire outside world, and I'm just going to create my own little bubble that I'm going to live in where I'll be safe and where I'll be protected. It's an understandable thing to want to do. It's a very scary thing to deal with. But I don't think that it's the right way to do things, and I don't think it follows biblically what we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to turn into this isolated island away from everything else where we just kind of escape and not deal with the whole outside world. In Matthew 5:14 through 16, it says, "You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." And so what that means is that the way that we are supposed to be represented is as a light of the world, as something that the world is supposed to look to us, to see how we do, to be able to present this gospel, the message to them. We're supposed to be an example where they see us and they see, wow, I want to be like that person. It's something that we're not supposed to just hide away from everything, hide away from the world, isolate ourselves from all these things, but we're supposed to be there, be present in some sense where we're not hidden, where we're not under a basket, but where we can be a beacon and where we can spread the gospel to others. And that other bit where it's, but what about, the second coming? It's right around the corner. We're right at the end times. And that's entirely possible. It is entirely possible that in the next few years, the next generation, that Christ will return, we'll go through the tribulations, we'll see the rapture, all of these things. But it also might not be. To put things in perspective, the Hebrews considered a generation to be about 40 years. And so it's been almost 50 Hebrew generations since the death of Christ. this could be the last generation, sure, but who knows? There could very well be 50 more after this. There's many times where things have been very bad for different groups of people in different nations, and where a lot of people thought, okay, this must be it. This must be the end times. When the Vikings invaded England in 900, they were armies that came out of the north, which fit with some of the biblical passages. And so people thought, okay, this must be the end. Jesus must be right around the corner. There's all these pagan armies that are coming through. They're destroying our kingdoms. They're going to sweep through the whole world. But what ended up happening was they ended up becoming Christians. When the Black Plague spread through Europe, that seemed like famine and like plagues, and a lot of people died during that. And a lot of people thought that that matched up with the end times. But life went on. It eventually stopped. We eventually found cures for it, and it's really not something that we even think about anymore. And then after World War I, you had tens of millions of young men who died in warfare. This was just over 100 years ago. And then right after that, you had the Spanish flu sweep through and kill another 50 million. Like, between the two events, that's hundreds of millions of people dying. And we don't even think of those things that much anymore. But at the time, it seemed like, okay, these are these incredible wars, incredible things going on, this massive changes, all this death, all this destruction. But it went on. And so there's a lot of answers as well in terms of theology and God, where if you say, I have no idea, it's a really bad answer. Like if someone came up to you and asked me, hey, do you think, is God real? Can I know God is real? And I said, I have no idea. There is absolutely no way I should even be close to this stage. I have a lot more to learn and a lot more to do. But there are some answers where I just don't know, or I have no idea, or is the correct answer. And I think this is one of them because we see it in the Bible. In 1 Thessalonians 5, 1 through 2, we see, but concerning the times and the seasons, and this is in reference to the end times, the times where Jesus is going to return, you have no need that I should write to you, for you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. And when it says a thief in the night, it's saying that it's something that's unexpected. It's something that you're not going to, you don't expect the thief to come in and break into your house, take all your stuff. It is very interesting that Jesus decided to describe himself as a criminal in that analogy, but I think it sticks, and it's a good one, and it works. I think the best attitude that you can carry in regards to that answer of when is Jesus returning, are we in the end times, are things just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse until we hit the tribulations? I think the attitude that is best carried is that Jesus Christ could return tomorrow or 1,000 years from now. So you need to make sure that heaven is your home, that tomorrow you could stand in judgment of Christ and you would not be found wanting. But you also need to make sure that future generations are set up so that way they too can make heaven their home. We can't just focus on ourselves, focus on the end, okay, this is it, and then just don't need to worry about the future because it's all done. You need to set up things so that future generations can succeed, can prosper, can have these things. So that's one of the things that we need to do. And there's one other way that I have seen many times among different Christians and how they respond to it, something that I've fallen into as well, is that we'll say that we need to show love for everyone and we need to be Christ-like. And that is absolutely not the wrong answer, but so many Christians are wrong in terms of what they mean by love for everyone and what they mean by being Christ-like. What you often see this in action as meaning is that you're never going to address anything controversial ever. You're always going to be super nice, super polite to absolutely everyone. You're never going to say, hey man, I don't think you should do that. Maybe that's wrong. Have you considered doing this? You're going to just go along with everything, enjoy everything. Like, be the one that a lot of, I remember this specifically, is that like, you would have, I had some friends that were atheists that really didn't like God, and they were like, I really like you, Tim, because, like you never do anything that I wouldn't like. You're not judgmental at all. You don't have any of those things. And now looking back, it's like, oh, so what they meant was, I never did anything at all that showed that I was a Christian overtly. They just knew that about me because I told them, and then so they liked me as this example of the good Christian because I didn't do anything at all that would maybe have changed their mind or diverted their path. And so the other thing that you'll see in terms of when they say Christ-like, they'll have this view that Christ was never harsh with anyone at all. He was always just gentle, kind, loving. And that means that they really have not read their Bible at all, if they have that view, and that's what they came away with. Some people might have a little more developed view of it, where they say, oh, well, Jesus Christ was really harsh with the religious people, the Pharisees. But when he interacted with sinners, when he interacted with people who were lost, he was never rude. He was always super loving, super kind, never did anything that was could be considered mean to them. But that's also not true. In the Gospels, you see Christ admonish plenty of people who are sinners, where he points out truths to them in order to help them. But those truths are very uncomfortable ones to them. There are so many examples I can think of. Like one comes to mind right now, the woman in the well. He tells her, like the woman says, oh no, I don't have a husband. That's right. And Jesus literally just says to her, yes, that's right. You have 5 and the man you're with right now is not your own. Just immediately just throwing out, hey, you're in a relationship that you know is wrong and you're doing it wrong, and you need to bringing that right to the forefront of that conversation. And she literally says that she knows that he's a prophet because he was able to point that out. But probably the most clear and blatant set of verses where we see what it is to be Christ-like with people who have turned away from God. And there are many ways to do it. It's not to say that always you're supposed to admonish it. It's not, carte blanche to go, hey, everyone who's a sinner, I'm going to tell you that you're going to hell. That's probably not the right answer to this as well. But sometimes bringing stuff like that up is the correct answer. It all depends on what reading the room, understanding the people. And at the end of the day, when you have this love for this person and you want to see them do well, you're going to understand the right things to say and the right things to do. When that is your priority and when you have that love and you want to see them do better, then the right things will come. But anyways, the set of verses that I wanted to read for this would be Matthew 11, 20 through 24. So then he began to rebuke the cities in which most of his mighty works had been done, because they did not repent. What are you, Chorazin? What are you, Bethsaida? For if the mighty works which were done to you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes. But I say to you, it will be more tolerable for Tyre and Sidon in the day of judgment than for you. And you, Capernaum, who are exalted to heaven, will be brought down to Hades. For if the mighty works which were done in you had been done in Sodom, it would have remained until this day. But I say to you that it shall be more tolerable for the land of Sodom in the day of judgment than for you. So Jesus went to, this is a summary of what he was saying to people within these 3 cities where he did most of his works. And it was that he was going to unrepentant sinners and telling them that because they had not repented and they had seen the works that he had done, they had seen miracles, they had seen what God could do, and they refused to repent, that they were in store for an extremely bad fate. And when he says it will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom, just keep in mind, Sodom was one of the most grossly, overtly sinful cities, so much so that God wiped it out with a meteor because of how horrible it was. He's saying that it's going to be worse for them than for those people. So just keep that in mind. I really want to focus on that one and just take that in. It will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom in the day of judgment than for you. So Jesus is saying that when you've seen people, when you've seen miracles, when you've seen what God can do for you, when you've seen these things, but then you refuse to repent, you refuse to turn to Christ, you refuse God after seeing all of these things, after seeing the works of God, that's pretty much one of the worst fates in store for that person. And so what comes to mind for me in terms of like how we can understand it is that I think that people who are backslidden kind of fall into that category. And it might be hard to take that or to understand it. But if someone has seen what God can do, known what it's like to be a new creation, known all these things, and then they decide to turn away from that and go the other way and just live in sin. It's not to say that they need to be sinless or that they can't have sinned, but it's that they've decided, I'm no longer going to try to repent. I'm no longer trying to be sanctified. I am just going to enjoy this ride. That person is going to end up in a worse fate than the people of Sodom. And I really want to just keep that in mind, because we all know people that are like that have been a part of a church, been a part of these communities, have had some level of understanding. It's not to say that everyone who's been in a church falls in this category, but when it's people who do have a knowledge of God, do know what He's done for them, have repented, have done these things, and then they have turned away, these people really need to be saved. I guarantee you that almost everyone in here knows someone that's like this or has fallen into this category. I certainly know plenty that are like this. And I can say right off the bat, I have not even done nearly enough of what I should do in showing love to them, in trying to bring them back and do whatever I can to be used as a vessel for God to bring these people back to the faith and back to salvation. I have absolutely not done enough, but I think that when you really take in what fate is in store for them and how we're supposed to have love for everyone and love for people, that we need to really look at what we do in terms of trying to bring them back and what we can do to take people that were in the faith and out of the faith and try and bring them back. And that's to say that, calling them, texting them, we have them in our phone contacts. Give them a call every now and then. Send them messages. If they don't respond to messages, call them. If it's something that is, if you knew that there was something that went on with this person where some disagreement, some issue, do what you can to mend it. Just think about these people and just try and think of one that you might know and just make an effort to try and help them. And that's just all I would ask. I can't make you do anything. I'm not pastor. I can't give you a call to action, but that's certainly what I'm going to try to do. And I would just ask that you consider doing that as well. Let God use you as an instrument to rescue these people from the fates that they are choosing for themselves out of love. And you love them, and you do so by making a call for them to repent before it's too late. And so with that, I'd like to ask you to